Vice President Krieg.
Here.
Commissioner Brennan.
Here.
Commissioner Fox.
Also here.
Commissioner Letourneau.
Here.
All five commissioners are present.
All right, moving on to item number 2, which is communications. Do any of the commissioners have anything they received or heard that they would like to share with the commission? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 3, which is our consent agenda. Do any of the commissioners have anything they would like to add or take off the consent agenda? Otherwise, I will take a motion to approve as amended. Commissioner Brennan.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I will second that.
One second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to item number 4, which is our reports general. And we will start with 4A, which is our marketing and key accounts report. Ms. Walsh?
Thank you, President Mokel and Commissioners. On the conservation side of things, our 2021 results and 2023 submission have been approved by the state. Just today, I was involved in an energy audit walkthrough with one of our largest electric users. This was in an effort to help support their corporate sustainability initiatives. They were very appreciative and really liked that we found some options for them and then informed them of possible rebates that they could be taking advantage of. On that same topic, we continue to work with the school district to make their solar project a very positive experience for both the district as well as the students. We're trying to come up with ways that the students can be involved more on maybe the data management side, working with the dashboards and kind of incorporating that into their learning curriculum. From an AMI perspective, Katama is quite confident that the 2 vendors that we've selected to give us presentations will be good choices for us. And so those vendors who will not advance to the in-person presentations will be notified this week that they will not be coming in. On the marketing side, continue to work on budgeting for all of 2023, planning for all the events from both the chamber and the city and being participants in those. The next upcoming event we have is TAP 2022 this Saturday, and then the big vehicle fair is on Monday the 26th, which is a ECFE event. Due to possible delays with the MVEC territory swap due to meter supply chain issues, we have decided to send a joint communications out to those customers affected just to keep them in the loop, since we told them this would be happening by the end of the year. That may not happen, and we really have not communicated with them since June. So just kind of give them a quick update on what we've been doing in the months since we told them about this. Also, with regard to the MVEC territory swap, we've been working with select customers who had unique billing situations as an MVEC customer, and we're trying to figure out how we transition them into our rate structure. So we've had in-person meetings with them, just trying to give them really good customer service and make this transition as positive as possible for all of them. With regard to NISC, I had my first kind of training session with them on the communications. They've got a great package. We'll be ready to communicate the launch as well as any specific actions that customers need to take if they're on auto pay or ACH or e-bill, those types of things. And then lastly, we continue to get good response on our Clean Energy Choice program just by having that option on the applications. Since our last meeting, we've had 2 new businesses inquire about it. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Great. Are there any questions for Ms. Welsh? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on now to item 4B, which is our SPU Quarterly Investment Performance Review and Economic and Market Update. Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Madam President, Commissioners. Greg and I continue to meet with Danny and Brian at PFM. During these regular meetings, we discuss our current performance, things that we can, monitor, and we also watch the economic impact to our investments. We are this year working on a cash flow projection with them in conjunction with our CIP. But we do think it's important that we bring forward, how our performance is going and what the economic changes will do to that performance. And so we've invited Brian and Danny to come forward and just kind of give you guys an update and answer any questions that you may have regarding that information.
Great.
So I'll just
We're excited.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to join this evening. We appreciate the opportunity, and I was lamenting to Danny that the last time we were here, it was much snowier earlier this year, so better driving conditions tonight, and we're thankful for that as well. But as Kelly mentioned, I'm Brian Johnson. This is colleague Danny Nelson. We're with PFM Asset Management. We've had the opportunity to serve as SPU's investment advisor over the last almost a little over a year now, so we're pretty excited about the opportunity, and again, wanted to share a few things with you tonight. We'd start with a brief economic update, talk about how that's impacting SPU's portfolio, and then talk about, as Kelly alluded to, the cash flow projection as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Danny to walk through economic update. And I believe, Greg, do you have slides behind me? Great.
Coming up right now.
Good. And hopefully people on the phone can hear me. If not, I can get closer to the microphone. But again, thankful for the opportunity to join this evening. Danny?
Thank you. And so as Brian said, I'll briefly talk about a market update. If anybody has any questions, feel free to stop us as we go through this. But on on page 2, you can see one of the questions we've been asked by some of our clients is, are we in a recession? Unfortunately, GDP for the first 2 quarters of this calendar year has been negative, albeit very small negative amounts. But if you ask analysts on Wall Street, economists, if you ask the Fed, even the National Bureau of Economic Research came out and said that we're not in a recession right now. Part of that is because if we're in a recession, that means we're also seeing a rise in unemployment rate and lower wages. And it's actually been the opposite. We're seeing a very low unemployment rate, rise in wages. And so because of that, we're not in a recession as of right now, but that doesn't mean that we might be in one in the near future. So that's something that the Fed is looking at. And one of the reasons why folks are worried about possible recession upcoming in the next few months or within the next 12 to 18 months is what's basically been in the news over the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months is just high inflation. You can see that on page 3 where we show inflation numbers or the consumer price index. Unfortunately, it's been very high. CPI came in at 9.1% in June, which is the highest it's been in almost 40 years. Came down in July at about 8.5%. We get the August read in next week. The expectation is for inflation to come back down, but still, as you can see, much higher than the 2 to 3% range that we've seen prior to the pandemic and even in the beginning stages of the pandemic. So just keep that in mind, especially when you, in the future, talk about projects and whether it's electric projects, water, capital improvement projects, that inflation most likely will still remain somewhat elevated, at least in the near term. And so that's something that we've been telling folks as well, whether it's wages or whether it's, parts, just labor, materials, they're all going to be elevated, at least for the near term. The good news is, like I said, the expectation is for inflation to come down. It has come down, particularly on page 4. We do show how energy prices have slightly come down. Just a couple months ago, most people were lamenting about how gas prices were averaging over $5 a gallon here in the U.S. It's now, depending on where you go, anywhere between $3.80, $3.90, depending, is the national average. So it's definitely come down, at least on the energy side. Which bodes well, especially as we go into the winter months with regards to folks needing to heat their places with heating oil, natural gas, so forth and so on. So energy prices have come down. Expectation is for inflation to come down, but consumers are still feeling the brunt of it, and consumer confidence and consumer sentiment is still really low, and you can see that on the next page, on page 5. Even though we've seen an uptick in the last month in consumer sentiment, consumer confidence is still relatively low compared to what we're used to seeing. A lot of that has to do with inflation and just higher prices. prices, even though folks are making higher wages, the higher wages are not offsetting the higher cost of goods, whether it's groceries, whether it's rent, whether it's gas, and things of that nature. So, and that's really important to think about because 2/3 of GDP is consumer spending. So if consumers aren't confident in the economy and not spending money, that's where we could possibly see a downturn in the economy in the near term. One of the other things that consumers are worried about or depressed about on the next page is the housing market. And so on page 6, we show here how housing affordability has gone down significantly over the last few months. And so that's mainly because of 2 reasons. One, because of higher housing prices. And so you have a lot of people on the sidelines not wanting to pay those prices. The other thing is just higher mortgage rates. And so rates have shot up significantly, and we'll touch on that in a little bit. But with the combination of higher rates and higher housing prices, like I said, we have a lot of people on the sidelines not necessarily wanting to buy a house. The unfortunate part, though, is that rents are still going up right now. So people who are renting are still feeling the brunt of, like I said, the inflation effects that we're seeing. And so people aren't necessarily buying houses right now. And so we are seeing a shift in consumer spending as well. And you can see that on the next page in terms of what we're showing on page 7 is just, the manufacturing index and the ISM non-manufacturing, which is the services index. Both of those have come down, but the manufacturing index has come down significantly more, mainly because if you think about it, during the pandemic, most people couldn't go out. They were, locked down at home. So they were spending most of their money on goods to decorate their houses or to buy a car, but mostly on physical goods. As we got through the pandemic, as those lockdowns were eased, as people started to get out, they shifted from buying goods to going out and spending more money on going out to restaurants or to the movies or going on vacation and spending money on a hotel. And so we've seen, we saw a drastic shift in how consumers were spending money. Unfortunately, with higher inflation, like I said, we've seen a decline in the services index and in manufacturing, more so on the manufacturing side. And it, like I said, remains to be seen, especially with the higher inflation that we're seeing. But not to be the bearer of all bad news. On the next page, we do show the labor market statistics. And even though this is a little bit dated, we show statistics as of July here on page 8. The latest labor market statistics just came out this past Friday. As you can see, over 500,000 new jobs in July. We added over 300,000 new jobs in August. Unemployment rate is still relatively low at 3.7%. So the economy is really going strong if you look at it from the labor market. One thing to note, though, it's the labor market's really tight. We are seeing, about 2 job openings for every unemployed person out there. And so what that really means is that the labor market's really good for the employee or for the American consumer, not necessarily for the employer. And so we have a lot of employers and even state and local governments and utilities that we work with that are struggling to find staff or to fill certain positions and are having to raise their wages, raise their salaries, increase their benefits to either keep people or to hire new people. And so that's something I think you should keep in mind as well, that, that's probably going to be prevalent, at least in the near term, in terms of higher wages and a tight labor market that we're seeing. And so with that, the Federal Reserve is taking action. Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, did make a speech at the end of August, and we do have some of the quotes here on page 9, which is the next page. The one I do really want to focus on is the last highlighted statement that we have here, that the Fed is going to be a lot more aggressive than previously anticipated in terms of raising rates. And even Jerome Powell said that it's going to bring some pain to households and businesses. That means higher interest rates, higher mortgage rates, higher credit card rates. It's going to cost you a lot more to borrow. And so for households, that's going to bring some pain, and also for businesses in terms of borrowing money and things of that nature. So just also keep that in mind. And so the Fed is trying to balance in terms of not necessarily keep us, putting us in a recession, but also trying to lower inflation and inflation effects that we're seeing right now. They are kind of behind the 8 ball. They won't necessarily admit that, but they will be raising rates and probably be a little bit more aggressive than initially thought. And you can see that on the next page. The last time the Fed met was at the end of July, and you can see right now the current Fed funds rate is at a range of 2.25% to 2.5%. The market thought that the Fed funds rate will probably peak in early of 2023 at about 3 to 3.25%. After Jerome Powell's speech, though, the market now thinks that the Fed will probably raise rates a little bit more, and that the Fed funds rate will go up to possibly 3.5 to 3.75, possibly as high as 4% as early as 2023. And so what does that mean? Just to wrap up in terms of an economic update, we are seeing higher interest rates, as you can see on page 11. The 2-year Treasury has significantly increased, actually more than a 10-year Treasury. Part of that has to do with inflation and the fact that most market participants think that inflation will be higher, at least for the next 2 years, than it will be for the longer term in the next 7 to 10 years. And that's one of the reasons why the 2-year has increased so much, especially if the Fed is going to continue to raise rates. They want to be compensated for that rise in interest rates. And then on the next page, you can see the yield curve on page 12, which really, I don't know if it's really a curve right now. It's more like a flat line, and it's slightly inverted, and usually an inverted curve does portend to an economic downturn and or a recession, but we are seeing an inverted yield curve. And unfortunately, with the rise in interest rates, especially as you can see the 1-year range here, we've seen a significant rise in interest rates. That has led to a market value depreciation in securities in your portfolio, and we'll touch on that a little bit more when we get into your portfolio. As interest rates go up, market value securities goes down, but hopefully the higher interest rates will bring in higher coupons and interest payments that will offset that market value depreciation going forward. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions or concerns about the market before we touch on your actual portfolio.
Any questions from commissioners? Mr. Creed?
Yeah, so my understanding macroeconomic models is that the Fed wants to bring down inflation. They need to set short-term rates above inflation, right? I mean, I think that's traditionally how the equilibrium models work. But no one's really talking about short-term rates being 8%, 9%, right? So does that, the way I've tried to think about that is that the Fed doesn't really believe the full 8% is permanent, and when they're still thinking that part of it's transitory, and they only need to get to 4% to kind of bring inflation back down. Is that the right way of thinking about it? Is that how you guys are thinking about it?
So I would say the way the Fed's thinking about it is they're raising rates right now, but they know that the higher interest rates that we're seeing really won't have an effect until later this year and early next year. And so the thinking is, okay, well, if we raise rates to about 4% or so by early to mid next year, hopefully, and if you look at the Fed's projections, we don't have it in here, but the Fed is projecting that inflation will come back down to 4% by this time next year. And so that's why they're not thinking that they're going to raise it to 8%. That's kind of I would say they're a little bit more optimistic about inflation coming down than most economists in Wall Street, but that's why you're probably not seeing the Fed talking about raising rates out to about 8%. Like I said in one of the previous slides, we did show that inflation is expected to come back down. I think the market is thinking more like in the 5 to 6% range by the end of this year or sometime next year. And so that's why you're probably, yes, 8% is really high, and even 5 to 6% is really high, but that's probably why you're not seeing rates go skyrocketing up to that 8% range. So hopefully that answers your question.
I think one of the things there, too, that you touched on was the goods and services, right? I mean, a little bit transitory as well. We've largely kind of put COVID, hopefully, in the rearview mirror in the United States, but not every country is that way, right? So we are a net importer from China and other countries that are still in lockdown, and we can't get some of those items in, which raises the prices for some of those services if we can't get the inputs as cheaply as maybe we were, or even as much as we would be able otherwise, too. So there is a little bit of that, I want to call it transitory, but a little bit of that, the inputs in some of the goods and services are still.
I'll make you use that word. No one uses that word anymore.
But I do think, as Danny alluded to earlier, the Fed was behind the eight ball for much of last year, maybe not realizing where the inflationary status was, and then that's why they've been so aggressive, so, like I said, so quickly and so aggressively this year in terms of their moves.
Any other questions?
Good question.
Go ahead, Brian.
Moving on before I turn it over to Brian.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, Danny.
sorry.
I didn't mean to
Did it-
distract us.
I'll
Slides it over.
Right, yes, and then Brian will take it over. On page 14, we just want to show, for the second quarter of 2022, returns were down. If you do mark to market of your securities and all fixed income securities, and it didn't matter what maturity range or what type of security you invested in, mark to market and returns were negative. But if you take a long-term view, and most of the money that we do manage for the utilities are reserves and core reserves, over the last 10 years, returns have been positive. And note that the 10-year average that we're showing here is during a 0% interest rate environment. So the fact that we're in a higher interest rate environment right now, that should bode well for your portfolio in terms of seeing higher interest going forward. And then really quickly, before I do turn it over to Brian, on page 16, we do show our fixed income sector outlook in terms of what we can invest in for the utilities. We're slightly positive on commercial paper right now just because of the wider spreads. We're neutral on U.S. Treasuries, and you'll probably see a significant amount of your portfolio invested in U.S. Treasuries. We are negative on bullet agencies just because there's no spread to be had. The yields on bullet agencies are very comparable to the yields on treasuries, and so because of that, we would prefer treasuries. However, just more recently, we are buying callable agencies right now just because of the high yields, and so if we're seeing yields over 4% on callable agencies, we'd rather take that 4%, even if it might get called within 6 months or a year. We'd rather earn that 4% interest just for the short period of time. We are neutral on mortgage-backed securities, and we are slightly negative on municipal bonds just because a lot of state and local governments are flush with cash and are not issuing bonds as much as we've seen in the past, so the supply isn't there. And because of that, we not necessarily selling out of municipals that we have in your portfolio, but just not adding to the sector as we probably did previously.
Any questions for Danny before I jump into portfolio performance and allocation for the quarter? For the quarter end June 30th, 2022?
Looks like we're good.
Okay, I'll jump into it. So flipping over to page 18 here in our deck here, I wanted to just point out a couple of portfolio statistics for the commission here as well. You can see the total market value up in the upper left-hand corner there. One of the things I did want to point out just below that is the portfolio effective duration. So we are managing SPU's portfolio to a 0 to 3 year U.S. Treasury benchmark. We are slightly short duration of the benchmark, and that is actually a strategic move. We don't usually like to make, as investment advisors, we don't typically like to make duration calls, but with the interest rates rising as quickly as they are, we have been a little bit lighter in the duration target than we would be otherwise, largely due to, again, the possibility or what the Fed has been doing with their more aggressive rate increases, and even with continued economic data coming out, they might even be more aggressive than we thought. So we've having more of the portfolio maturing more quickly than otherwise would has been helpful in portfolio performance. You can see the great differential between the yield at cost and yield at market of the portfolio. Again, sharp rise in interest rates over the past several months has led to that negative overall performance, which we'll talk about. But you can just see the great disparity there between the two of securities that were purchased at any given time over the last 1.5 to 2 years, being much lower than where the market rate of return is for those securities now. And then the portfolio credit quality is strong AA, and you can look at that made up on the lower left-hand portion of the page there too, and how that's actually specifically broken down. In terms of sector allocation, as a reminder, we are bound by state statute and SPU's investment policy in terms of what we can invest in. So by 118A statute, short-term high-quality fixed income is really the name of the game, and you can see that there in the sector allocation. One of the things that Danny mentioned earlier is we're going to have a higher allocation to U.S. Treasuries, and that's really simply due to there's really no excess spread to U.S. agencies or federal agencies, comparable to U.S. Treasuries at the moment. We're starting to see that change. We're seeing a lot of value in callables, which we typically have not allocated client portfolios too much in the past, but we're seeing a lot of value on callables in the current marketplace, so we're taking advantage of that. as well as commercial paper with a 0 to 3 year U.S. Treasury benchmark. That is the one area where municipalities in Minnesota can access the credit markets, if you will. So we're taking advantage of some high-quality commercial paper issues in SPU's portfolio. Those maturities, just for everyone's benefit, are out to 270 days maximum, so they're all very short-term and high credit quality in nature that are put into the portfolio. And so again, really maintaining that safety liquidity aspect of the portfolio, positioning a little bit shorter of the duration target, just to make sure we're taking advantage of opportunities when the Fed continues to raise rates and rates continue to increase, likely will over the next couple months in the marketplace with the Fed's stance and aggressive actions. Any questions about the portfolio makeup, duration distribution, credit quality, allocation, et cetera, before I jump into performance? Okay. I want to move forward an extra page here to page 20. And this will just highlight the performance for the quarter. As we did mention, with interest rates increasing as sharply and as quickly as they did, the overall absolute performance was negative. The SPU's portfolio did outperform the benchmark by 5 basis points for the past 3-month period and has outperformed the benchmark by 14 basis points over the past 1-year period. Again, given what's happened between the end of December of 2021 into even as we sit here today with the rates rising so quickly, has really led to a negative absolute performance. But again, that's just an unrealized loss at this point in time. If SPU were to need funds out of the portfolio at any given time, that would be something that would be considered. But we have been in constant communication with Kelly and Greg throughout the past several months just to make sure we're aware of any future cash flow needs, et cetera, if the portfolio were to be needed any cash. We're hopeful, flipping over to the page 21 here, as higher yields start to be added to the portfolio, and we're looking at opportunities to continue to invest. Danny mentioned yields of 3 to 4% in certain areas, far greater than that 0.7, 0.8% of the overall portfolio yield at cost that we looked at on page 18. All that income is going to really start to help produce greater returns for the portfolio moving forward, and we're hopeful with the Fed potentially settling and negotiating that soft landing that they're looking for. The price volatility will be a lot less in the future there as well. So we're hoping that those blue lines kind of come in and maybe return to the right side of the column there for a positive positive price return, and that the gray lines of the income return continue to get to be a larger part of the overall allocation of return performance for the portfolio as those yields continue to increase in the portfolio as we are continuing to invest as securities come due in the market. With that said, the last thing I wanted to touch base on is, again, we're measuring that portfolio on a mark-to-market basis to really show you from a commission standpoint on how the portfolio is valued on a market basis. But from a pure income standpoint, continuing to produce income, there are no negative yields or anything like that in the portfolio. Everything is producing solid, positive yields and producing solid income, as you can see there on the lower bars there for the last 3-month and 1-year period. Just shy of $72,000 in interest earned in the quarter for the last 3 months, and then $277,000 for the last 1-year period. So again, still producing income, but we're really showing where the portfolio is at a market snapshot at a given point in time. With rising interest rates, it just devalues the portfolio, as Danny had alluded to earlier. So with that, I'll pause. I know that was probably a lot of information there as well, but if there are any questions, happy to help answer those related to portfolio specifics. And again, one thing I do want to point out too is with the shorter duration of the portfolio, and there's constantly securities maturing. So if there's any future cash flow needs, like I said, we've been in communication with Kelly and Greg to see what those needs might be. If we don't have to sell anything and take any market value loss, we're going to have something mature, and then there's nothing to have to worry about there, and the cash can be utilized for SPU's purposes. I'm going to turn it back over to Danny briefly here, flip over a couple pages past some of the compliance stuff that we have to put in there, but
Yes.
to have Danny just touch up briefly on the cash flow that we've been working on with Kelly and Greg as well.
Just really briefly, and Kelly already mentioned this, that we've been working together in terms of looking at the utilities cash flows, the CIP program, and on page 29, we just, this is kind of how at PFM we kind of look at operating funds and just, okay, well, how much do you need liquid for, your accounts payable, your payroll, and things of that nature. How much do you need short-term for any upcoming projects that might be coming in the near term, and then how much can we invest out a little bit longer? And so this is something that we've been looking at and working with the utilities with. As Brian mentioned, the portfolio right now that we manage is a 0 to 3 year strategy, and so we do have maturities that do come due very short term, and so we are in contact with Kelly. If you do need that money, if you don't need that money, we can definitely reinvest it. We have done a preliminary cash flow analysis. I won't go into detail, but pages 30 and 31 kind of show you, just the balances that you've had, anywhere from 50 to 60 million over the last 3 to 4 years, and this does not necessarily include all the cash that you have that's outside of what we are managing as well. And so we do have, as you can see here, a core balance, as you can see on page 30. Page 31 kind of just shows you, well, if you're not going to tap into that core balance, how much will your portfolio grow just through, price appreciation and interest that you've earned. Obviously, in talks with Greg and Kelly, we know that you will most likely dip into some of those reserves at some point in the future, and that's something that we are working with them on right now. And so right now, we're just showing a high level in terms of the balances, but we're looking at some of the different funds, whether it's the electric operating fund, water operating fund, underground relocation, trunk, connection, water, recon funds, just in terms of what are your balances, what is the 5-year projection in terms of how much you will be spending. And it's an evolving process right now, but it's something that we are still working with in terms of getting our hands together and just making sure that, A, there's enough cash and liquidity for the immediate projects in the near future, and B, then just trying to make sure that we are optimizing the core reserves that we're managing for utilities for the long term as well.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I would add there, Kelly and Greg, if you guys have others that you would want to, add in as well, just we've kind of had the model built. We have a lot of the inputs done in place. So as SPU starts to think about future projects, we have the ability to kind of pivot and show different scenario situations and how that might look moving forward, which I think will be a helpful tool as the commission and SPU staff start to look at projects and parse through things as future needs are looking to be met.
Agreed.
I'll just comment, and thank you for being here today and talking about this. And as we are looking at this, and as Joe is starting to build the CIP with water and electric and all the projects we got coming up, sometimes it does seem like there is a lot of cash, and we've talked about in the past on that. But when we start talking about a $6 to $8 million AMI project, and we're just doing the conversion to NISC, and now we're talking about land purchases and water treatment, and some of our substation will be about $4.5 to $5 million. So you will see some of this, going away, not quite as much. I think we got a good plan on how to get to a lot of places without selling debt yet. The big thing that we're looking on the horizon is when and if we need that water treatment, we will probably have to sell some debt because we won't have enough cash if we have to do some of those things. So we're working on that. We think that we'll get some better performance out of this as well in the future, and we'll be able to see some of this grow, and hopefully we can, also diminish how much we have to bond for some of these projects. So that's what we're kind of looking at now, and what does that look like for long term on where the utility is going. So they showed another graph that we looked at. If we do all of our projects, we definitely would have to do something on rates. So we're looking on that. What does that look like long term? So it's exciting that we have a good base to start with, but also we know we got lots of projects coming up that we're going to have to spend significant cash as well.
All right, any other comments or questions?
Thank you all for the time this evening.
Yes,
we appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
I
Thanks.
just wanted to let you know that, when we started this project, we knew we had a lot of money. It was just what we were gonna do with it. And so we just appreciate this last year. I know we didn't enter on a good market, but hopefully we can take advantage of some of these interest rates rising. So, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
Danny and Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly.
All right, with that, we will move on to, did we need to approve anything there or accept anything?
I think it was just an update.
All right, we'll move on to item number 5, which is our liaison report. Commissioner Brennan, do you have anything you'd like to share with us?
I don't have very much, and Sharon kind of alluded to TAP 2022 is this Saturday, 1 to 4 in downtown Shakopee. And this is promoting innovation in the beer industry, because we are a large beer and community. So I don't know if you know that Rars Malting is celebrating their 175th year in Shakopee. So this is just to kind of go off of that. And I guess that's all I have today.
All right, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Commissioner Brennan? All right. Hope to see everybody downtown this weekend.
Yeah.
We'll move on to item number 6, which is our public comment period. If anyone is, from the public is present, please step to the table, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, we will move on to item 7, which is our general manager report. Mr. Durant.
Thank you very much. A couple exciting things. We did host the blood drive, and thank you, Denise, for really taking that under her wing to get that. We had 28 donors, 27 units collected. We had 13 first-time donors, so that was exciting, and 81 potential lives saved. So that was really cool that we were able to do that in the parking lot. We had some people, I guess, come in and say, hey, how do I give blood? And we had to say, well, it's not, you had to sign up for it and stuff like that. So Denise asked me about doing it again. I said, absolutely. So November 3rd is the next one, so we'll get some emails out on that. So November 3rd, we're going to do that again from 8 to 2. So exciting that we can do that and be a part of the community and really help the Red Cross out on that. So that was very successful. I did get an email this week also, and I got to touch base with Kayla also. We did get Thursday, September 15th at 10 a.m. at the PUC, as our service territory is going to be in front of the PUC. So I will be attending that, so I got to get that in, and I'll work with Kayla on that. So it's exciting that we know it's a done deal, and we're working towards that, and we hear the service territory thing, but we did get the docket this week on that as well. So we'll continue to move on that. Contract extension obviously got approved today, so that's good. Sharon also mentioned the solar, and we had a couple MMUA meetings with solars and schools, and to help that, I've been in contact with Mandy at the state to get our program done here in Shakopee, and engineering is working on that. So we're online now. We're able to modify their application process and get that. So I did have an email with Mr. Redmond, and either the 12th or the 26th, we're going to do a short presentation at the school board to hopefully get that approved. So I will be attending one of those meetings unless it's later than that, so we'll work with the school district on that. But we're excited that program is off and running, and then Joe will have some stuff, and we'll have some discussion on solar as well today. And then obviously we got NIST training coming up. Then that's why we don't have the next meeting, just a reminder on that. So we'll definitely have that. AMI is going well. We've had internal meetings on that, as Sharon said, down to 2. So we're excited that we're moving forward on that. Again, developments seem to be still going strong. We had a data center come in this last week. And talk about potential expansion. So obviously we'll give the fees to them and what that looks like. Our past, nothing that's breaking ground besides some of the other developments, but we continue to have meetings with developers on that. Met with Mr. Kursky on some other projects throughout the town, and so that was good to get back together with him. We had the summer conference that a couple of us went to with MMUA. There's lots of discussion on solar and the extension of the credits that people are able to get. So there was lots of discussions on that. EV rates, supply chain issue, infrastructure planning, kind of were the key main topics that were talked about at that. What does the infrastructure look like with EV on it, with solar, some of those things, and then supply chain. So really people on how to get together to buy stuff together, really so not everybody has huge inventories. So we're working on that. This Thursday, we got an all-employee meeting here at SPU, so we're actually going to close down from 7:30 to 8:30, the front office. We're working on our pay for performance review process. It's something new for us. So we just decided for that 1 hour, it's kind of in the middle of when people are real busy time, so we scheduled it so everybody can get the same input. We can ask questions as a group. So we're going to do just a small little breakfast, and we're going to get together and say, hey, this is what we're working on pay for performance as we go into the budget cycle as that. We're doing some water treatment sites and appraisals, so we're working on that. We got another lead actually yesterday, Friday, and today, so I'll continue to work on that. We've been canceling a couple contracts that we've had to cancel for some of our old software stuff, so I've been working with Kayla and getting our language correct on that, so we're working on that. And then today we also met with Dave Berg, and he is going to work on a little bit of rate for us and a recommendation on EV charging rate for a DC fast charger. So we've had a couple of our businesses wanting to put in EV chargers, and they want to go to the DC fast charging. We don't think that they hit us on our peak times and stuff like that. So we talked to him. I talked to him at the conference also about what that looks like. So we think that we should have a special rate, maybe not a demand rate, but a higher kilowatt hour rate. So he's going to look at that and look at where those revenues would hit and stuff like that. So we're working on that as well, because it's something that we want to continue to work on. And then also we talked to him real briefly, and Joe and I afterwards on what is also on fees, water irrigation and processed water. So we're going to try to get back to that on what does that rate look like, and for that processed water that doesn't have specifically go into the sewer. So we'll continue to look at those things as well when we can squeeze it into our days. So with that, I will stand for questions.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Drent?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Drent. I just wanted to let everybody know as I move on that we have a little numbering issue. So if I read something different than what you have in front of you, I just want you to understand why. So item 8 is our water items, our water system item operations report. Mr. Schemmel.
Thank you very much. I do not have a Flushing update for this evening. We've had vacations and whatnot, and Flushing has slowed down a little bit. Geez, when the next meeting is, I'm sure I'll have one by then. Well 23, they still continue to pump out sand. The third blasting really opened the hole up. More sand keeps falling in. That's actually a good thing, because the larger area that they open up and the more fissures they expose, the more water it'll produce. So I don't know. I mean, they should still finish by November. That's not an issue, but they thought they'd be out of there and developing by now. I do not have any PFAS update for sampling from the state yet. Actually, that's all I have for the operations report this evening, if there are any questions.
All right, are there any questions on the report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the static water levels.
Okay, thank you again. This time of the year, you hear a lot of news, negative news about certain states, running out of water, for various reasons. Something that, happens in some of these states is they have a lot of water bottling plants. And when you bottle water, it basically goes into the bottle and you ship it away. It does not go back into the ground for recharge back into your wells. Irrigation really isn't that big of an issue if the system's maintained well. It falls on your yard, it goes in, and eventually ends up right back where it came from. But when you start mining a resource like that, it's kind of a consideration. Minnesota doesn't have a lot of that. I mean, California has over 110 bottling plants in their state. So I tried to get some hard data on that. I couldn't find any non-biased numbers. It was American Bottling Institute says one thing and all the environmental groups say something else. I couldn't find anything that read reasonably, but that's one of the issues is it raining? How much are you mining? Stuff like that. So with that, I presented the numbers here for 2012 forward, some of the more interesting years. This July was our heaviest month. We did 325 million gallons of water with an average of 10.5 million a day. August was lighter, 272 million with an average of 8.8 million a day. And there's usually about a month lag. On these graphs, you'll see where August, there was a decline in 4 or 5 of the wells. Those have already rebounded 8 or 9 feet by the September numbers. What we would usually see that might cause some concern is if by the second month after a heavy month, we didn't see the water levels coming back. You know, that would be a time when we would stop and say, well, you know, let's really lighten up on the use of this well. As I mentioned in my memo here, we rotate our wells. We do not just turn them on and run them forever. I mean, basically they'll run for a week and then they go into a lower step where they'll be on and off for possibly 3 weeks. You know, it's just a control issue. We have the luxury of excess supply, surplus supply. A lot of towns, you know, they can't do that. You know, they have to run everything they've got, you know, during their summer months. Another thing is your policy on irrigation. You know, it's always in effect for the summer months. We don't wait until we have a problem and then have irrigation controls. You know, our customers are great. You know, a lot of the ones we have to talk to, they either say they weren't aware of our policy, or maybe their controller's old and doesn't do odd even. It does every other day, but it doesn't know odd even. So at which point we do say, by the way, we give deep discounts on a rebate on smart controllers. On conservation this year, we already have over 1 million gallons in savings on new conservation devices through rebates. So that's, you know, one small day in the winter, but it's something. You know, we keep moving. Every year we have more and more rebates. So with that, are there any questions that I could answer?
Anybody have any questions about the static water levels?
I just have a comment. I think it's positive looking at kind of the combined graphs at the end, that there's not kind of like a slow, you know, decline in the overall levels. It seems, if anything, our levels have held pretty steady over the last 10 years. I think that's a positive thing. I mean, you hear things all the time about water levels dropping and aquifers getting light, so it's good to see that in the numbers, it's not something we have to worry about.
Well, I think it's important to note that, you know, as the Met Council, they're always moving water around and looking for water in places. And so my fear with that is at some point they are going to say, hey, Shakopee, you got some water over there, share. So what is our, like, long-term strategy with that?
Actually, when I talk to them, they want more and more people on surface water. They don't want you withdrawing groundwater. So it kind of depends, I guess, on which day you're talking to them, you know. But they are, my opinion would be that they would more want us to almost like say withdraw more or buy more water from Savage, who buys almost all of theirs from Burnsville, which comes out of that quarry. That would be, in a way, getting us on more surface water and away from groundwater. But with this kind of data, I don't think they could really make much of an argument that we need to do that. So,
Just waiting for the day.
yes.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Grant.
And I asked Lon to look at this, and I appreciate all the numbers, and I do agree that these graphs do show that we're not trending down. So that is the exciting thing. We talk about this at a lot of meetings, that we're in good shape, but until you see some of these graph levels, you know, it's a little bit of, okay, it's a leap of faith to understand it. Yes, you know, I've said it many times, yes, we have the capacity. We have the capacity for expansion. We have large customers that come to us. Yes, we have that. And you can see why on these graphs, and we do it on the same on the electric side of things, is we really have this balance, and the commission in past has always been like, we need to make sure we have a good, solid base and where we're at, and it shows on these graphs. And I think Lon is spot on that when we can run some wells and rest them, it helps the aquifer, right? It doesn't just always draw down on that. So I was excited to see this. I know that one other time Commissioner Krieg asked me, you know, hey, how do those levels look? And so that's why I asked Lon to work on this, and a really very good outcome on this, that we're in good shape and that we'll continue to do that. I agree, though, it is a fear that, you know, someday somebody says, we'll just pipe it from Shakopee or the Jordan Aquifer and out of here to somewhere else. There's no doubt on that. So I think we're in good shape, and I think we're poised for the future, and I think we'll continue to drill some of these wells to make sure that Shakopee is served for a long, long time. And I guess that's what we can do right now, and I think being on the political side of things to make sure we're educated, that we go to those legislative rallies to make sure that they don't lean on us and say, hey, we got to protect it for these people in this area as well. It's just one of the things that I will be working on as well, and just to make sure we're on top of that.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Schemmel.
Thank you very
Appreciate it. All right, we will move on to 9A, which is our electric systems operation report. Mr. Carlson.
Thank you. Crews have been very busy with multiple projects going on all over town. Last week, we had taken a portion of Circuit 22 out of Blue Lake Substation out of service, backfeeding the rest of the customers. Contractor developing SMS Hench's site out there was taking down multiple trees, so we decided that for a customer's standpoint, we just isolate that section, let them take down multiple large trees, and then put it back in service. County Road 14 SMSC, we had relocated some single-phase underground for some ponding going on with property they had purchased. McKenna Road, we're about 90% complete of installation of underground, just some street lighting going on, some tie points on that project. Minnesota Valley, crews have been busy putting together tie points for future when we cut over, that everything goes smooth, timely fashion. We also had crews out at Toro. They did a shutdown for some maintenance on their site. We started the underground relocation up on Polk Street. We have a feeder in some backyards that's hard to maintain. We're pushing that out to the street side. So we have a bore contractor boring some pipes up there, get that feeder relocated. Core crossings out by Stagecoach, Southbridge area. Crews are setting the transformer out there. Installation has been completed on that project. And then we also lowered Dean Lake Feeder 41 in the Secretariat, County Road 83 portion. They're putting in a new cul-de-sac by the McDonald's there. So we had crews lowering that. And then the West Shakopee substation, if you've been by the site, it's moving very fast. All the grading is done, the ground grid is going in. They're starting to work on foundations for the transformer and switch house. Kind of waiting to see when the transformer is going to be delivered. We were thinking end of September, beginning October. We don't really have a date yet, but hopefully they got all that ready for that to be put in its place. We had about 3 outages since our last meet, 2 very small ones. One customer squirrel, and then one, we had a line fuse open on Kavanaugh Drive. That outage was unknown. We also had a larger outage on Circuit 32. We had a contractor bore into one of our mainline feeders over there. So with the large outage, it really only was 38 minutes. We had everybody back up in power. So very quick response from our crews. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Carlson? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will move on to 9B, which is our solar program workshop. Mr. Adams, is that who is?
Yeah, well,
I'll
I'll just say a little bit, and then we'll let.
I thought you were
Okay.
gonna go first.
I asked Joe, and Joe and I worked on this project, so this is more of an informational discussion. Please, if you have any questions, stop us. This is meant to be more informal, answer questions, talk about some of our solar programs that we have. I asked Joe also to look at our current solar systems, how many is on our systems, what is the impact of solar on our systems, as well as we have a large customer that's looking at it, and then the other one would be the school one that we kind of want some additional direction on. Overall, the solar program has been very successful in Shakopee. As you can see, there's over 200 systems on our 200 solar arrays on our distribution system. Most of them are under 40 kW. We have one that's under 100 kW. But most of them are under 40 kW. And again, we attach the statutes with this as well to discuss, what does that look like? What rules are there? Sometimes when you read the documents, it talks about public entities, and that's really are publicly owned.
Public utility.
Public utility, and that's really somebody that can invest in that, like an Excel Energy. So it's not because we're Shakopee Public Utilities, that's not us. So if we're in the co-op and municipal frame of their statutes. So sometimes it gets confusing even when I read it. It's like, well, we're publicly owned. Well, we're public, we're owned. No, that is considered like an Excel Energy. So when you read those statutes, there's different for that. So for us, the rules are less than 40 kW is net metering. What is net metering? Net metering is if it's a small enough system, we have a meter that goes both directions, and then there's also a production meter. So they can use power and they can push power back on our system. When they push power back on our system, we legally have to pay retail rate, average retail cost in that rate class, so of a residential customer. So as we've talked about before a little bit, that right now it's probably 14-ish cents that we have to pay for that. Well, we can buy it for something less than that currently when we buy it at a wholesale level. But when they're smaller units under 40 kW, that's what the statute says, so we follow that statute. So we've been doing that on most of those 200 customers. Most of them, and you have to talk with billing a little bit more than me, most of them use almost all their energy. They'll have some months where they may have get a credit, and then we balance that out once a year, I believe that would be true, or monthly. Monthly. So most of the time it's just to balance it out. On the one page we got 202 systems. We just wanted you to see where they're on our system. I mean, on the sheet, you can see that all the DG, that's distributed generation, they're all over our system. So it's not in one specific area. Obviously, some of the, not a lot downtown, but more towards the other side of 169 is most of ours, but they're on our system. They impact our system minorly, but like, again, most of them are used internally, so we don't have too much worry about them stressing. Actually, it relieves our system a little bit, but then again, we put the infrastructure in place, and now they're not buying kilowatt hours. So that would be the only thing on that. So in past, we've given rebates for these. It used to be a lot of money on rebates on what we used to do, and we had it where the money would run out fairly quickly on rebates, so we have reduced it. We tried to keep the pot the same size, but we just wanted to give it to more people. 2 years ago, we had like 100 applicants. I don't think 100 got on our system, but we had over 100 applicants. Different varied. Some people went with theirs, some did not, and then it kind of slowed down a little bit. But now with the renewed tax benefits, it's really picked up. And I would say in the last 2 weeks, I've signed off on 8 of them or so, 8 or 10 solar. So it's kind of picking back up again. But we only give the rebate if it's under 40 kW. So we try to limit it that way, that we don't give rebates if it's more than that. We're at $1,000 right now. And for net metering install, so if they meet those criterias. So we do give a rebate on them. 40 to 100 is a little bit different. We have one system that's a 99 kW. Joe, you can just talk about how that process works under 100 kW on the one customer.
So on that customer, because it's over the 40 kW for net metering, we have a meter that, like on all the others, measures what's generated. And what's generated is purchased at the avoided cost of wholesale power that MMPA publishes a rate that we use to compensate for that generation. And that customer's, all its use is from our system like a regular customer. So the benefits are less when the system's not net metered, because you're getting paid less for what's generated, and you're buying all your needs at retail at our rate. In many other systems, below the 40, you know, they're self-generating some, so they're avoiding paying the retail rate. And when they over-generate and push it back on the system, they even get reimbursed at a slightly higher rate because it's including some of the fees that get added on to the published rate.
Anything else on the under 40 KW? I mean,
Not on the other, below 40, no, I think the other 2 points on there about the schools and the above, you know, the large system above 100 KW, that's,
yeah, so I'll talk
we're
about the school.
discussing.
I'll talk about the school, and then you can talk about the 400 KW large one. So,
Give me
this.
a minute.
Yeah.
Let's.
But there
see
might
if-
be
I just want to do questions first.
No, that's a
as
good
we
idea. Yep.
into parts here. So is there any questions so far from anyone?
What is roughly the avoided cost rate?
It's about 2.5 cents, 2.7 cents. Yeah.
I would say next year will probably be a little bit higher, right? I mean, this last year has kind of gone up some, but.
Do we ever do any kind of question to the customers that do get solar, like why they're doing it or what their reasoning is? Just not from a, we want to, discourage them from doing it, but just from a idea of why they're going on the system now versus at other times. Because I think, as I've been watching on like Nextdoor and things like that, there's a real conversation about electric cars and doing solar to offset the cost. And so I was just wondering if we do any of that kind of research and with some of the.
I don't think we've done any formal surveying. There's conversations that occur all the time with the party that contacts our employee that works in the engineering department who handles these applications. We've switched this year to a portal that they can make the application through, so some of the verbal conversations aren't taking place like they used to. Most of the contact seems to be with the vendors who are selling or leasing, or however they're doing their financial arrangements with the owner of the property that's being installed on. And I think it could be for EV, it could be we want to be green, they don't want to pay extra. To us, under our clean energy program, they perceive that as an option, but if they can do the solar and the solar company comes, seems like a couple of them just canvassed neighborhoods with their salespeople and sold them on the idea that here, this will pay for itself over time. And after that amount of time, your system will still produce energy and you'll be saving even more.
Yeah, and I think.
The tax credit is a big component of that payback.
I mean, we have the addresses. I don't think it hurts. I don't know what kind of, response we'll get, but Sharon, I think that let's work on something, just as a, what is your take on it? How, do you like it? Is it what you thought it's gonna be? Those type of questions we haven't asked some of our customers as well, so.
Yeah, I worry about the vendor thing, right? Like you have the person that's coming and putting this in, filling out, like when we did our oh my gosh, water softener install. The application just went through the person that installed it. I didn't have anything to do with the application. It just came to my door. I signed on it, and the company took care of all of that. So I'm worried that that's how this is going, and the person that's actually getting it on their home doesn't really know, doesn't have great detail on it.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing, I mean, obviously, we've talked about the cost of energy. This year has been escalated but over the last 10 years, we've had about a 1%, and a lot of times, most of these companies are 3 to 4, even 5% escalation, and that's what they're basing the savings on, is that the rates are gonna continue to climb at a very fast rate, and compound, it really affects payback on them. So it would be interesting to get some feedback from some, if we can get some customers that'll answer surveys. Surveys are sometimes it's pretty tough to get people to answer them. But I think if we can make it short, hopefully we could get some feedback on people's their thoughts on how it went and are they glad they did it. I will say that most of these houses can only handle a certain size, and you know, but they're getting more efficient as well. So most of them are 5 to 7 kW on a normal home. I would say, I mean, we've seen some 9s and 10s.
Yeah, actually, looking at the statistics that Jay shared with me, the average is growing. It's gone from 7 kW size average system for 20 systems in 2019 to 8 in 2020 for the 43 systems to 9 in 2021 for the 113 systems. So not only are the number of applications increasing each year from 20 to 43 to 113, but the average size of the system is getting larger
And I
from
think they're
7 to
probably
8
just
to
more
9.
efficient, right? Like, I mean, because there's
Yeah, the
only
roof
certain-
area is only
The
so
roof area
great.
is the roof area.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think.
And I
it's
think
a
partly because of
combination,
the efficiency and the cost, not everyone who applies for it gets a rebate, because some of the criteria in the rebate is that you naturally are being efficient and you're facing the panels in the most efficient direction, south. But some systems, because they're getting bigger, because the overall size capacity of the system is, they're putting them on east and west too, even though they know those won't generate as much as the south-facing ones. But the cost of the panels has dropped with the continuation of the rebate. It actually went up. It was going down. Now it's up to 30%. They still will generate some energy in the morning and in the evening, so, you know, before sunset. So the systems are getting bigger because of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can some of the surveying idea be done through the application? What is the application? Can we just make it some of these questions of
Right, like
pre-questions
just a-
part of this?
Or it could be linked to a survey if they volunteer.
Something like that.
It's a canned program from a vendor, so I don't know that you can add something like that, but we might be able to have something of a link where we could go to a Survey Monkey type thing.
Yeah, we can look at that. The real question I would be interested in is, well, I guess maybe before they install it or after they install it, was their information accurate, right? Like that.
Right, and those are curiosity, yeah,
about.
were you
Like-
given the right information?
Correct.
You
Like,
know,
is payback what you think it's gonna
Yeah.
be?
Right.
Is it a lot longer? And then maybe we could have some just things on our website, did you know? That type of stuff. So we'll look at that a little bit more.
How much did we really want to get the information? Because we could say like $5 credit on your bill or whatever for actually filling that out.
Kayla's gonna cringe on this deal probably, but I'm not sure what we can do that. I'll double check on that. I don't mind that. I don't mind the concept. I mean, I think there's some rules. We just need to make sure that what we can do, so.
I've been walking around our community a lot lately, and people who have solar panels love to talk about their solar panels.
Okay.
Because it's been a great way to open a conversation, and, oh, I see you have solar panels, and they just love to talk about their solar panels. So I think it'd probably be easier to survey than you might think.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and I think my whole, same way, I just want to make sure they're getting the right information from these people that are selling them
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
panels.
So,
My
I mean-
biggest concern.
I mean, just in perspective, Joe had asked him to run just some minor numbers on the 200 units that we have. How many kilowatt hours do we about get out of them? Commissioner Creed was asking that just a little bit.
So with the average size being 8 kW, we looked at a couple typical ones that are that size. We're seeing the production meter around 9,500 to just under 10,000 kilowatt hours a year is what is being generated per 200 systems. So I think we would have, I think there was a question about the 4% rule.
Yeah.
Because there is a provision in the statute about, but I don't know if it applies to us as a municipal so much as it applies to the public utilities that we define, that are defined in the statute, but they can begin limiting these systems when they reach 4% of sales. But for us, that would be almost 2,000 systems, and we're at 200. But we seem to be adding them at an increasing amount, so we're at 100. plus last year, and I'm not sure the pace, if Jade told you the pace. This year, I think, is similar because of the renewal. It's picked up since the renewal, the tax credit.
Yeah, and we sell about, Kelly can correct me if I misspeak on this, but about 450 million kilowatt hours a year. Just so in perspective on that. So that's about what we sell per year as a utility. So to get to 4%, it's a lot of systems. So we're not anywhere close to that. I don't think we're going to broach that for a long, long time. But just to put it in perspective on what they do generate. You know, the other one is you know, the $1,000. We are able to claim some savings on conservation side of things. So that's why we've given the $1,000 rebate. That comes out of our conservation bucket, and we are able to claim some savings in conservation, and so that's why we've had that line item listed in our conservation, and we've done it that way. So
Were those numbers much higher in 2016? Was the benefit to us much higher when we were giving out so much more?
No,
It was just a-
no, it was just that there weren't that many people doing
Doing
it.
it.
And, you know, we budgeted $60,000. We've kind of kept that constant. We just cut, you know, there were only a dozen applications or 10 applications, so they got 6,000, but then we cut it to 5,000. Now we're at 1,000. But I note, we had 113 systems in 2021. That means not everyone got even the $1,000 rebate. Some of them don't qualify because of the efficiency, or they may be putting in a 9 kW system, but only 4 kW. We used to do it on a per watt basis, but now it's just a flat number. So as long as they're, enough of their system qualifies, they'd get the 1,000. But I guess now would be the time to discuss, so you want to keep it at 1,000 in the future per system, or do you want to spread it even thinner or wider to be $500 so that, or $600 or something to get it to more people? Or do you want to increase the pot of money, or what?
We've looked at that, and we've looked at other utilities just for reference, and we are on the high side. I would say most are around 500, I think, from what I read.
500 to 750, I
500 to
think.
750 is most utilities. So we are on the higher side for giving a rebate on that. Not that that's a bad thing, but I mean, I think that's one of the things we looked at back then, is when we went from 5,000 or 6,000 and we reduced it down, is just we were way out of bounds from what most utilities were giving for a rebate. And then these people were putting them in, and they hardly had any skin in the game, right? I mean, they were able to get the rebate and the tax credit, and all of a sudden, the vast majority of their system was
Paid for.
already paid for. So I think Sharon's got a comment.
I was just going to say, in 2021, we did not use all $60,000, even at 1,000. I think we came in around 57,000.
Yeah.
So then some of the ones that were on the list weren't qualifying for rebates for whatever reason.
Do we have insight into what the individual systems generate, or we just kind of have to guess at that?
Well, we have the production meters that are installed, they're being read, so we're tracking what the individual systems are generating. I looked at a couple with billing, and that's how I calculated out how many systems it would take to get to 4%.
It'll be a lot easier with AMI. I mean, we say that a lot, but
Yep.
really, we will be able to look at those meters when an AMI meter is in there and say, this is what the system looks like. But we are able to read them. We can just go, we just have to go, what did last month it do versus we can't instantaneously look at it, so.
Yeah, I just think it'd be interesting. I know the panels have changed a lot over time, but just to kind of look at, you know, what are people actually producing, given the size of the systems they're installing? And
That would
are
be
they even
interesting.
coming close to?
Yeah, Joe, could you look that up, just kind of see like what a 8 kW system 5 years ago and an 8 kW system now, is there a difference? Or is there generating more or less or about the same? So some of it is challenges what direction, but hopefully we can get one that's fairly close, or a 10 or whatever the number is. So help us understand that.
All right. Let's move on to schools, and then we can
Oh,
come back.
yeah, so the school, obviously, we've got the two systems at the school. Right now, as of right now, I have offered the same rebate to them that we offer to our regular ones. We are also have a learning center portion of this that we've, SPU has assisted with, and Joe can talk about that and what they have there. But really, we're just looking for some guidance on whether you think we should have a little more skin in that game, just because as an education piece, as we try to go to the schools, as we partner with schools, and we hold events once in a while for different schools that we're able to educate them. We're gonna try to do a little more education piece with this, so we can go to the schools and help with them. But Joe, you wanna talk about the Learning Center a little bit on what we've done in the past?
Yeah, the Environmental Learning Center that they have at Shakopee High School, there was a program that MMUA was promoting at the time, and they provided some funding so that they could get a solar array on the ELC. And we provided, SPUC provided funding for a wind turbine. So there's a wind turbine and a solar array at this small building that's on the other side of the parking lot there. They also, MMUA's participation included coordinating with a startup company at the time on battery storage. So there was a battery storage element to the system of the two distributed generation sources. That battery system was rudimentary. It was lead acid batteries, and time has passed and those batteries are no longer functioning. And so they've taken that part out of the ELC. There was a there is a dashboard, and it is reporting, if you know how to read it right, what the generation is at any time. But you no longer have the part about how much has been stored and being able to be used when there isn't generation going on. So with technology, there are better alternatives to those kind of battery storage devices. One thought might be to work with the school to get a newer version in, like a Powerwall or something, other product, and whether or not you'd want to assist with that or not, or offset it with the larger solar panels that are going on some of the other schools. But there's an app-based program where as part of the learning component, they'll be able to display in wherever the school wants, on their website or in classrooms on a display at any one time, what's happening with the different solar panels on school 1, 2, or the ELC. They would also be able to see what's happening at the ELC in other classrooms. If the battery storage was a component of, I think that would be a attractive element to it. It once was there, but nobody has the funding for it. So I would pitch that be something we think about doing if you want to help out in the school program.
So when we ran the numbers on this, really, the school is gonna be, into this, after the grants, they're gonna be into this for about, somewhere between 20 and 25,000 per system, so they're gonna be at about $50,000. But they're gonna have two 40 kW units, so I think it was like 120, but give or take a little bit of this extra stuff that we're talking about, and the grant is like 104. So they're gonna be somewhere between 20 and 25,000 per system that the school's gonna be into it. So, I've talked to Superintendent Redmond about, is there something that we need to work on with, because of the offsetting energy versus just as a capital project? And he said they're probably just gonna run it as a capital product and be able to pay for the difference after whatever we decide to help them out with the system. So currently, I've offered, just as our normal process, 1,000, but I would be supportive of, hey, we're gonna do that, plus we're gonna try to help with the battery banks. We have batteries at all of our substations and doing that, so we have some exposure in the battery world, and we know what that takes, so we would get a company to help us get through that as well. So we think it's a good learning environment, and we can teach kids about energy and energy storage and what that looks like. So really, if we're just kind of looking not for really emotion, but if you want us to bring something back and what that would cost, or if you give us some indication of, hey, we want to double the amount for the solar and to say $4,000 instead of the 2,000, and work on the batteries, we'd be open to something like that too. So we're just trying to get an indication on where to move on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think doubling sounds like I think more contribution, obviously, with the educational piece of it is great. I have no problem with that at all.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, this is for two systems. The school's program is going to be ongoing. So are we going to form kind of an expectation if we give them more that when they do this in the future that they're going to get more then as well?
Well, I mean, I think I can have that discussion, right? Like, we want to get this program running. We want to get everything working properly. Our normal rebates is this. And I think it's just a request from the school in future ones, and we'll see how funding comes in. So I do understand that because there is several schools that could happen. But I don't think it's the reason they're doing it. I think it's just a great partnership. I think we've tried to be a great partner, especially in the last couple of years, on lots of things we do in this community. And I think this is just one more way for us to have them be successful. We're talking about less than a 5-year payback, and they were looking at more of like a 20-year payback. So we're super excited that we're able to drive down the cost on this and help out the school and really the community, because we think it's the same ratepayers are really paying most of the operations of the school. So we think this is a successful program for everyone, and it's the right thing to do, and that's why we want to do it.
So how much energy would one of these systems generate for the school?
I don't know the exact kilowatt hours. It's about $5,000 a year in actual savings on their utility bill.
Okay.
Right about $5,000 a year, so.
That's how we get the 5-year payback.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so somewhere between 4 and 5-year payback, yep. It's like $5,200. I can get you the
Yeah, yeah.
spreadsheet, but it's low 5,000s, depending on how much, and it fluctuates every year, how much is energy cost. This year it's probably more like 5,600. Next year it may be more like 5,200. So, but they don't want to do it based on kilowatt hours. They say they have some money in their capital, so they said they're just going to pay it and then just from day one see that $5,000 a year and less. But and this and a lot of the systems are like the one system I think like they're around not uncommon 400 kW, 300 kW at a school. So this is something that's much larger. This is a small percentage of their actual usage. So depending on what school it is, they're all a little different. So, but we have anywhere from 300 to 500. Even I think we have a 750 kW transformer at one of the schools, or actually 2 of them at this high school and stuff. So, yeah. Just so in perspective, we're not worried. It's not really cutting right down where they're all of a sudden not going to have a utility bill. They'll still have a very significant utility bill.
I mean, the expectation isn't that much, if any, will go back onto the system.
Yeah, none of it. Yeah.
They'll absorb a 40 kW system almost all the time.
Yeah, I'd like to see what the cost would be for the battery and kind of, I think that's something that kids would be interested in. I think they hear about that a lot. So if we could kind of bring that in and kind of make it kind of a full system for them to look at.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. All right, so then, well, for that one, and then we'll just move on to the bigger one, I'll let Mr. Redmond know that we're gonna double that to 4,000 or 2,000 per system, and then Joe and engineering will work on that, and we'll just probably see if it's gonna happen this year, or if it's a longer lead time, then we'll just put it in the budget, otherwise we'll absorb it somewhere else, but we'll probably just put it in the budget, I assume, this late in the year, lead time on stuff, it's probably gonna be a little bit tough to get everything done, but we'll just put that in the budget for schools for next year.
So would you say that this is a unique relationship between a school district and a utilities company in what we're trying to accomplish? Do you know of any others that are doing something like that with the schools, or?
There's a few that are starting to. I mean, and Kayla is involved in some of the conversations as well as Really, this is the first one in the municipal side of things. I don't know if co-ops or investor-owned utilities have those type of relationships. But as far as the municipal and the 100 and some that are in the state, this is really the first one that we're able to get this put in place. And I've had, and Joe has been on, and Kelly's been in some of the meetings. We've had three other utilities call us and say, how did you get this? We gave them the proposal that we have on hand and said, hey, you can go through this vendor, local electrician. And we have one other school district that now is on the utility side, and they're trying to work on the same thing. So it just takes a lot of work. I mean, we have to build relationships, and it took us a while to show them what their bills look like, what they're gonna look like, and once they really got involved and they got to educate themselves. Most school districts, it's tough because it's just a number. They don't understand utilities, but they should more. And luckily our school district here is just wants to get educated. And once they got educated, they said, nope, we don't want to go that way. And then we put together a package here at the utility, and they're super excited about that. So I would say that I don't know if there's any other ones in the state right now, but there's other ones that are trying to build that relationship to make it happen, because I think it's important that we do that in the future.
I hope that, like Shakopee Valley News would see that relationship and do a story on it or I mean, if you're unique, you should be recognized for being unique.
Yeah, I think that, after we can get this thing up and running, I think that it's us, it's a school district, and also I think our local electrician also did a great job of saying, hey, this is important to us as well, and I think he gave a great price as well. And so I think it helps to have people that you have those connections and we're able to move forward on them. So yeah, I would love to do that, and I think it probably will happen if we can get everything approved and make sure that we're heading the right direction. So I want to, this one's not digging a shovel in the ground quite, this is putting it on top of a roof, but if it happens, yeah, or when it happens, absolutely, I think it would be great to do that. So.
Agreed.
All right, so we'll move on to Joe. You want to talk a little bit about our over 100 kW, 400 kW unit that we've had some struggles with.
Yeah, one of our customers has been contacted by a solar developer who has applied through the portal. The application had some issues, so through the process, we ask questions, they revise it. Ultimately, as it stands right now, it's kind of in a status of being extended, but they don't want to revise it the way we've suggested. So we kind of have an impasse. We'll have to reject it formally, but if they don't revise it. The issue is it's proposed to be over 100 kW, well over 40 kW, and they proposed it initially as a net metered facility. And we pointed out, because the solar developer may not be used to working with a municipal electric utility, that unlike a public utility, the way the statute reads, up to 1,000 kW can be net metered, but for a municipal and co-op, it's 40. So we pointed out you can't be applying as a net metered facility. They revised it, but they kept it at 400 kW, and they're really wanting to be net metered, but they know the rules say that we don't. See, their interpretation of the statute and ours is kind of an issue. They believe that their customer, our customer and their customer could put in a larger than 40 kW system as long as they're absorbing all the energy and none of it's going back out onto the grid. Because they've said, well, let us put in the bigger system and we don't even care if you pay us anything for what goes on the grid, because none will. We use so much power, energy, that it'll always be absorbed. And if it's not, if there is a circumstance where it's generating more than we're using, we'll just flip a switch and disconnect the system. So it won't ever go on. And we're like, that's not the way we interpret the rules. The rules are based on what is the capacity of your system. And it's not about how much energy you put on. The rules are what you get paid for if you do put it on, but you can't interconnect a system and have it set up and wired in a way that it's net metered if it's above 40 kW. What you need to do is put the system on a separate connection to our grid, and then you can get the MMPA avoided costs. Now, MMPA was involved in the discussions with us and this customer. They said that their tariff, which you've adopted, isn't a specific cents per kilowatt hour, it's market rate. It's what they would be buying at any given moment, and it's constantly changing. The solar developer struggles with this information to show a financial report as to what the cost will be versus what the benefit will be. Because it's a number that's undefined. It's future market conditions. So they asked, well, what is the historical? And MMPA was helpful in providing some ranges, but again, nothing's guaranteed. The past is, the future is not gonna be the same as the past. So we're kind of in this situation right now where we're still dialoguing, but they want to see more information than we can provide, so we have to bring MMPA into the mix because we buy all our power from MMPA unless the state mandates we buy from distributed generation. Like if it's under 40 kW, we can pay the average retail rate. If it's over 40 kW, you got to kind of deal with MMPA and deal with their rates. I think MMPA wants to get away from the hassle of figuring out what the real-time pricing is when the system's under 100, but we'll do it over 100. So there has to be special metering that they can read, they can see time of use and when the generation is coming on, what the market price is for that hour. The customer's solar developer doesn't want to hear this right now, so we're at an impasse. And you might hear about it, you might not hear about it, we don't know.
So now, do you know the customer knows this, or are we just working with their
We've had meetings with the customer,
as well? Okay.
with MMPA, and we've had several meetings with the solar developer without MMPA, and I think they're asking that we bring MMPA in so they can better understand our relationship with our power supplier and what our contractual requirements are. But the solar developer continues to believe that if the system is never going to generate onto the grid, because they're going to always absorb it, and they can control that they can have the larger system. And we don't think that's the way the rules are. So we're going to clarify with MMPA, but I don't know what else to say about it other than it's at an impasse.
Yeah, and I think we just wanted the commission, if you get a call or, somebody says, we're impeding the solar development, and that's not the case at all. There's certain rules that we have to follow, and we're following them. So I think it's more of, that we think that this is gonna happen more and more, where people are gonna have questions about it, and we're following state statutes on what it looks like to develop and solar, and we'll continue to work with Kayla on that to make sure that the definitions are, and we're following the state statute, and we're not trying to slow down or stop solar. It's just there's certain rules and certain contracts that we are with MMPA that we don't want to get tripped up on the backside where MMPA says you can't do it. I mean, this 400 kW on a large system, it might not affect that, but then the next one is 1 megawatt. And if we do it to this one, then we have to allow the 1 megawatt the same way. And so we're just trying to be consistent for all of our ratepayers. And we just wanted the commission to be aware of it, if we hear anything more about it or they want to come to a meeting, we wanted you to be somewhat educated on what that looks like.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, Kayla, do you have any other comments about the net metering and solar, or we can bring this back at another one if you want to investigate it a little more?
Oh, Madam President and Commissioners, I don't know that I have much to add, but I do agree that the statute really sets forth distinct categories based upon your project's capacity, and the levels that are being discussed with this application are indeed levels that trigger involvement with MMPA. And I would counsel the commission not to find yourself in the position of being awry with respect to your all requirements contract with MMPA. So I'm pleased to hear that MMPA is participating in these discussions and is providing some helpful information, because I think they are a very important player given the size of this particular project.
Okay, thank you.
So is the right way to think about this, we have service territory, the solar developers coming in, they're essentially selling 400 kW to this customer on our service territory without any kind of form of compensation? Is that one way to kind of think about what the rules are designed to protect, right? That they're not coming in and generating and selling power within our service territory.
Well, in this case, they're selling the
system.
DG,
Right.
the system.
I mean,
It's not a
sure.
leaseback deal like was earlier discussed with the school alternate. But what it is, though, is I think the rules are set up. I mean, all the stakeholders were participants between the independent power agencies, the public utilities, the investor-owned public utilities, the cooperatives, the municipals, the solar developers, and the contractors and the vendors. They were all party and had input before these statutes were written and before these rules were, I can't pronounce that word that starts with a P, PRO, promulgated. But they had their say, and they want a different deal now. They're set up to protect everybody's interests, including all our other customers who can't afford to put solar on their homes, because this is part of our system. We invested in the substation, the feeder lines to the site, the lateral facilities, the transformer and lines that actually they're connected to. And we expect a rate of return based on projected sales and demand on our capacity. Now, they take it away, but we still have to maintain that because the sun doesn't always shine, as we know, and we don't have a standby rate at this time. But I think the rules are set up to protect everyone's interests, and they were all agreed upon. If not agreed upon, the public elected officials agreed upon them at the state legislature, and the governor signed it as law. And until, if they don't like the rules, they want us to do something beyond the rules, then they should be lobbying the legislature instead of hammering up our small municipal utility relative to the size of an XL. We're a small utility.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing is, we're a fairly large municipal utility, but there's lots of small ones that if somebody put this type of system on their system would really, really affect their rates. And I think that's why some of the rules are smaller for municipal owned. A lot of times we're smaller in size, and we just don't want to negatively impact other customers or have subsidies for this to happen, so.
Right. All right.
So.
All right, well, we'll be losing Commissioner Brennan here soon, so I thought we could wrap everything up. Is there any other comments or questions? All right, is there anything for future agenda items? Seeing none, just a reminder, September 19th is canceled. We will meet back here at October 3rd. I will take a motion to adjourn.
I will provide that motion to adjourn until October 3rd.
Yes, and a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.